polished rock and strangely formed ice monuments dominate this extraordinary habitat in southern Argentina, in the heart of Patagonia. The Los Glaciares National Park captivates with its untouched wilderness and surreal scenery. The starting point of our journey through one of the most fascinating landscapes on Earth is the capital of the Departamento Lago Argentino, El Calafate. With around 12,000 inhabitants, it's easy to get around this small town that was founded in 1927. El Calafate's future development is closely linked with the national park, and tourism has boosted the town's economy. Local traders and souvenir shops dominate the town. The inhabitants of El Calafate have fully adapted to the requirements of the tourist industry, and the region's new airport has added to its success. Despite its tourist industry, the town has its own unique charm and is extremely popular with its international visitors. Its large variety of shops makes El Calafate a shopper's paradise, especially for those interested in arts and crafts. A souvenir from Patagonia is guaranteed. El Calafate, the capital of the glaciers, is situated on the shores of an impressive lake, Lago Argentino, Argentina Lake. Outside the town are vast, lush meadows that are frequently swept by the strong winds of this region. Despite the harsh climate, the local vegetation is surprisingly varied. Wind and rain are also frequent in summer. The period between October and March, the mildest time of the year, is the main tourist season and a good time to observe the local wildlife. The Lago Argentino is the habitat of a large variety of water birds. The biggest and most spectacular of the indigenous birds is the condor, which is to be found in the remote mountain areas. From El Calafate, there are several ways of exploring the lake and its surroundings. However, the best way is by boat. And there are plenty of photo opportunities. The decks of the excursion boats provide a wonderful view of the surrounding mountains with their high, snow-covered summits and mighty glaciers. The Lago Argentino, that measures around 1,500 square kilometers, is located amid the Los Glaciares National Park. Several mountain rivers, as well as the ice of various glaciers, flow into the lake. In addition to its marvelous scenery, The lake also attracts many anglers who are drawn by the splendid fishing that is to be had here. However, it's not the fish, but the massive icebergs that catch the attention. They're a truly majestic sight. Icebergs are one of the most popular attractions of the boat excursions that travel the Lago Argentino. The huge icebergs of this large Argentinian lake originate from the glaciers in the southern part of the Los Glaciares National Park, such as the Perito, Moreno and Uppsala glaciers. Here, the elements have created wonderful ice formations and even ice caves. Huge chunks occasionally break off and plunge into the lake. In summer, the many excursion boats on Lago Argentino highlight its popularity. The Uppsala Glacier on the northwest tip of the lake is the biggest of its kind in South America. Its dimensions are unique, and the glacial tongue of the Uppsala stretches 50 kilometers into the lake. This huge glacial gate on the banks of the Lago Argentino has a width of between 6 and 7 kilometers. It's a fascinating sight. Again and again we encounter huge icebergs that float peacefully in the water until they eventually break up with violent effect. Huge sections of the Uppsala Glacier occasionally fall off into the lake, which often results in meters-high waves that can be extremely dangerous. In contrast to the Uppsala Glacier, the smaller and more southerly Glacier Speccazzini is not visited by the normal day trip boats. It derived its name from an important scientist, former Italian-Argentinian botanist Carlos Luis Speccazzini. Despite its small size, this glacier provides a remarkable insight into this world of eternal ice in the heart of the Los Glaciares National Park. Finally, the impressive trip on the Lago Argentino comes to an end, and further boats wait to get closer to the glacial tongue of the Glacier Speccazzini. Since the construction of a brand new road, the park's most famous glacier is also accessible by land. On our journey to the Perito Moreno Glacier, we pass by a picturesque mountain lake. Colorful blossom adorns the landscape. The variety of local vegetation varies according to the region's various climatic zones. It's mainly perennial herbs that grow here in the coldest regions. Along the road that leads to the main vantage point of the Perito Moreno Glacier, there are several small waterfalls that cascade hundreds of meters into the valleys below. Next, the glacier comes into view. The Moreno Glacier exists due to the merging of several large ice flows. Its tongue flows slowly into a southern tributary of the Lago Argentino. The contrast of the local flora and fauna of the Los Glaciares National Park with its lifeless masses of ice is quite striking. The endless ice flow of the Perito Moreno Glacier sometimes reaches as far as the Magallanes Peninsula on the other side of the lake. Thus, the Brazo Rico is separated from the main lake. The water is blocked by ice and the surrounding land is flooded. The water of the Brazo Rico eventually overflows across the glacial tongue. Finally, the mighty tongue of the Perito Moreno breaks up and the water masses flow into the lake. In recent times, these impressive natural spectacles have become few and far between. It's not known if climate change is responsible for this. Yet the ice of the glaciers still continues to form. Next to the huge kilometre-long ice wall of the Perito Moreno, the boats look quite small. A deep rumble announces another natural spectacle, as sections of ice break off and plunge noisily into the water. In contrast to most of the world's glaciers that are now growing smaller, the Perito Moreno continues to expand. Each day, the ice moves towards the lake by around a metre. The Perito Moreno is part of the Campo de Huello Sur, a large continental glacial area in Patagonia that geographically is part of the Andes. It was once known as the Bismarck Glacier, its current name being derived from the Argentinian scientist and geographer Perito Moreno. Close to the eternal ice, there is plant life. In this part of the Los Glaciares National Park, paths and dirt trails lead through the wilderness. When walking along the paths here, there's a good indication of the varied plant life that exists in the southwest of Argentina. And if one is a little patient, some of Patagonia's wildlife can be seen. On the Magallanes Peninsula, opposite the Perito Moreno, is a vantage point that provides a most spectacular view of the glacier. It's like looking into another world, one that is full of primeval power and mysterious beauty. Here, indigenous animals can be observed in their natural environment. Birds circle in the sky, but don't appear to be impressed by the icy landscape below. It's in the warm months of summer that the largest sections of ice break off from the glaciers. It's a magnificent natural spectacle. Visitors to the park witness this natural spectacle that has taken place each summer for thousands of years. A visit to the Perito Moreno Glacier is like a journey through time, a trip into the last ice age. Indeed, around 18,000 years ago, large areas of the Earth's surface were covered with glaciers. They cover almost a third of the land. Now glaciers are to be found on only around 10% of the land. This is what makes the glacial giants in the Los Glaciares National Park all the more remarkable. One of the main attractions is the tongue of the Perito Moreno Glacier. Here, in the eternal ice, is the largest supply of fresh water on Earth. Luckily, the glaciers of Patagonia have been spared from human interference. Only possible climate change causes concern. Until now, it's believed that global warming has had no adverse effect on the Perito Moreno Glacier. Its tongue continues to expand. Here, nature appears to be untouched. Yet the national park is not totally uninhabited. The drive from El Calafate in the north to El Chaltén is, for most of the journey, uneventful. We seldom encounter other vehicles on the road. The journey takes several hours and takes us past Patagonia's beautiful mountain scenery with its strangely shaped rock towers and peaks. We travel past various sites that were created by man, such as the region's oldest hacienda. And now we have our first sight of the legendary Fitz Roy Mountain. It's still another 80 kilometers until we reach the mountain. In the language of the primeval inhabitants of Patagonia, the Turquoise Indians, the mighty mountain was known as El Chaltén, the volcano. As we enter the small village of El Chaltén, the summit of Fitz Roy Mountain is shrouded by cloud. Established in 1985, the village lies close to the Chilean border. In winter, only around 100 people live here. But in summer, the village comes to life. Today, El Chaltén is a paradise for the adventurous. It's the ideal starting point for tours into the northern part of the Los Glaciares National Park. Tourism is also booming in this remote location. Visitors from all over the world are accommodated in the small inns and restaurants of the village before commencing their various journeys into the wilderness, abandoning the comforts of this colourful settlement. The life of the inhabitants of El Chaltén has been adapted to the needs of the region's tourists. From hotel rooms to tents, there's a good range of accommodation here. It's a popular place. The streets possess a carefree atmosphere. Everyone is relaxed in El Chaltén. Various small shops contain traditional souvenirs. The people are proud of their cultural heritage, including their locally made arts and crafts. From El Chaltén, our route travels through the Los Glaciares National Park into the Valle de las Vueltas and to the Lago Argentino. At this altitude and climatic zone, primeval forests dominate the landscape, and the unique Río del Salto waterfalls come into view. A path leads past the waterfalls and rewards us with various impressions of the clear mountain water, as well as unspoiled nature and its fine plant life. Horses graze in the valley. The atmosphere is tranquil. Most visitors appreciate the remoteness of the landscape and the area's natural beauty. The combination of rock and water that lies in front of the 3,000-meter-high mountain peaks is quite breathtaking. The summit of Fitz Roy Mountain can be seen from everywhere, a sight full of noble grandeur. The 3,406-meter-high Fitz Roy Mountain is one of the most famous natural landmarks of the Los Glaciares National Park. At the foot of the mountain, there is nothing to indicate just how dangerous it is to climb. Many attempts have ended in failure. Flamingos, along with other water birds that live here, don't seem to be at all impressed by the dramatic sight of this extraordinary mountain. The first successful expedition up the Fitz Roy was in 1952, when a French team, led by Lionel Terray, triumphantly climbed to the top. This section of the national park provides various walking trails, some of which are not too demanding, and most lead past the Corrillo del Salto. The walks provide magnificent views of the waterfalls, marvelous scenery and untouched wilderness, typical of this region. In contrast to the barren world of glaciers, there are also densely wooded areas. Great contrasts in the landscape have been created by varied patterns of rainfall, and the plant life has benefited accordingly. Another exciting attraction is this wild mountain river that travels along the valley and flows from the Lago Argentino. After a few kilometers, the river enters the Lago Viedma. In this part of the Los Glaciares National Park, the primeval beauty of the Argentinian south is at its most splendid. With several colourful varieties of butterfly, the forests here contain a large number of animals. Patagonia's exotic species of animals and plants are the greatest treasure of this remote landscape that lies between the eternal ice of the glaciers. The fascinating interplay of barren landscapes and living nature has a unique charm. The local vegetation is at its most splendid in the more humid and warmer areas of the park. Close to the forests, the water of creeks and rivers from the higher reaches of the mountains tumbles down into the valleys and creates a white foam as it dashes against the rocks. A walk through the northern part of the Los Glaciares National Park is a marvelous experience due to all the natural impressions that can be experienced in the tranquility of this remote location. The water of the mountain rivers provides an important habitat for the local fauna. The clear, melting waters of the glaciers is home to sprouts, while from high up in the trees the rhythmic and unmistakable knocking sound of the woodpecker is to be heard. Next, we reach another of the national park's lakes, the Lago Argentino, that is not only famous due to its beautiful location, the 530 square kilometer lake was once an explosive political focal point, as it lies on the border between Chile and Argentina. Today, it's difficult to believe that this lake was once at the center of a major border dispute between Chile and Argentina. Subsequently, the dispute was settled and peace has returned once more to this enchanting mountain world. After a short but spectacular boat trip, we reach the other end of the Lago del Desierto. Argentina's border guards are stationed on this side of the lake, a beautiful setting for such official duties. Since 1994, when the border dispute ended, the north of the Los Glaciares National Park has returned to being its normal, peaceful self. The majestic snow-covered summit of the 3,400-metre-high granite Fitz Roy Mountain can also be seen from the Lago del Desierto. Back again in El Chaltén, there's a chance to go on one of the many walking tours of this area and to make for the best vantage points. In the lower areas beyond the village, the vegetation is dense and varied and a wonderful sight after the arduous walk. As we travel higher, the landscape becomes more barren, but there are fantastic views across a picturesque valley and river. In addition to the steep incline, it is the strength of the wind that makes progress increasingly difficult, and some of the gusts are particularly powerful. Both flora and fauna have gradually adapted to the harsh conditions of this region. Because of the long, hard winters that have an average temperature of around 1 degree Celsius, the tourist season lasts only 6 months. From October until March, the thermometer climbs to an average temperature of 11 degrees Celsius. It rarely rises above this. Due to the steep terrain that is covered with paths, perspiration is not unusual in the El Chaltén region. Short stops are important as they often spawn a few surprises, such as rare plants growing alongside the path. The highlight of any walk through the mountains in the northern part of the Los Glaciares National Park is the Mirador Fitz Roy. Here, the weather is very changeable. During a period of only a few hours, it's possible to experience all 4 seasons of the year. The Fitz Roy Massif is unique because of its sharp tines. As suddenly as it grows dark, the sky brightens up once again. The mountain was named after the captain of Charles Darwin's ship. The return of the sun shows off the summit of the Fitz Roy in a friendlier light. In addition to the Lago Argentino, the Fitz Roy Massif and the mighty glaciers, the Lago Viedma that is situated in the northern section features another scenic delight of the Los Glaciares National Park. The journey south from El Chaltén to the Lago Viedma travels through an area with a large variety of fauna. After some kilometers, the focus lies on the lake and the surrounding magnificent mountain scenery. We continue our journey by boat across the 450,000-hectare Argentinian National Park. The drive to the Viedma Glacier begins. The contrast of the modern excursion boat that is equipped with all the latest technology and the untouched wilderness could not be greater. As with the Lago Argentino, the Lago Viedma is a glacial lake, 80 kilometers long and 15 kilometers wide. It is Argentina's second largest lake. The drive to the glacier gives us the opportunity to enjoy the thought-inspiring and marvelous views of this fascinating mountain world. While the captain steers his ship skillfully towards the Viedma Glacier, several photos are taken. One of the most spectacular experiences in this part of the national park is the approach of the boat towards the gigantic ice masses of the Glacier Viedma, the second largest glacier in Los Glaciares. As soon as the boat passes by the huge glacial wall, some of the features of the ice giant become obvious. For thousands of years, the forces of erosion have cut several large caves into the ice. The stones that the glacier took with it, from tiny pebbles to several tons of heavy rock, left traces underground. The trip to the Viedma Glacier is not limited to traveling by water. Passengers leave the boat by a handy jetty. After a short but steep walk on a path that has been dug into the rock, we reach the edge of the mighty glacier. The glaciers of the Los Glaciares National Park really do form the landscape here. Even the rocks have had to make way for the untamed power of the ice masses that have flowed towards the lake. So, over time, many fascinating forms in the rock have been created. The visible ground-down rocks are an indication of the global warming that is affecting the glaciers of Patagonia. Here, close to the Viedma Glacier, ice and stone dominate, but there are also some tiny members of the plant kingdom that can be seen. Small stones that are carried along with the glacier act like sandpaper on the rocks below. For visitors to the Viedma Glacier, the most thrilling and spectacular leg of the journey lies ahead. A walk into its ice fields. Climbing irons are fitted, and the adventure is about to begin. After expert instruction from the guide who explains various safety rules, the journey onto the icy glacier commences. Among the most beautiful and unforgettable impressions on the eternal ice of the Viedma are the many deep caves that have been formed according to various prevailing conditions. In summer, the melting ice takes on an almost artistic, natural power and flows down over the rocks onto the valley below. Another visual highlight of this amazing tour into the fairy tale world of the glacier is the play of colour on the ice. Besides the colour of the ice, it's also the fantastic shapes of the frozen water that makes the journey to the Viedma Glacier so outstanding. In some places, individual stones are enclosed within the ice. They are a reminder of the enormous might of the glacial ice that forms this landscape. The several metre thick, shining layers of turquoise-coloured ice are an incredible sight and hold everyone who sees them spellbound. Clearly, it's not only the natural beauty of the glaciers that is highly prized. It's also the fresh water that they supply that is very important to our planet. In large areas of Patagonia, rainfall is scarce, but the mountain and glacier landscape of this national park guarantees a healthy supply of water. The wonderful combination of ice and rock have created a fantastic landscape that almost looks extraterrestrial. Nowhere else on this planet does one get the feeling of the insignificance of man compared to the glacial giants of Patagonia. To be close to these glaciers is a truly unique experience. This world of ice imparts a feeling of timelessness for those who experience it. These relics of the Ice Age have dominated the landscape for millions of years. The Viedma Glacier leaves those who see it with an indelible memory of its size and its beauty. The Los Glaciares National Park, a scene of grandiose natural spectacles, a haven for those who seek tranquility, a dream world of ice and rock. This remote region in the south of Argentina has most certainly retained its natural beauty right up to the present day.